All right. Is this thing on? Hopefully it is. Hello, hello. As you may have noticed, we are without a Jeff again for a second time in a couple weeks. But I promise you he will be back, I believe, next week. So won't have to miss him for too long. So for everybody who wasn't here a couple weeks ago when I took over the stream, I'm Stefania Sharp. I'm a senior solutions architect with the Alexa team. I've been with the team for 3.5 years. I've worked across everything from kids to games to fitness. Not a lot of stuff I haven't touched. And now I work with the Alexa for business team. So I work with Alexa in offices, but happy to talk to you about Alexa today. Hey, everybody that was here last time. It's good to see you again. In case you're wondering what Jeff is doing instead of hanging out with us, let's see if I can share. No, I can't. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so this is what Jeff is doing instead of hanging out with us. So feel free to heckle him on Twitter about his choices and not hang out with the Alexa group, but whatever, we're gonna have a good time anyways. I think we already had a question in here as well. Fabio was asking about Alexa entities. Is there something specific you want to know about Alexa entities or just in general what it is? Happy to answer that. Yeah, actually, I don't know where Jeff is, but it looks super exciting. He was also in a ball pit, which I gave him a hard time for. And as everybody knows, last time we were working on a Yukon Trail experience in Skillful Builder, which I may pick up again, depending on how busy we are. It is post-holiday weekend here in the US. And so I think a lot of people took today off or relaxing, you know, taking it easy for the week. Should be pretty busy next week. How entities work. Okay, so Alexa entities, honestly, if you think about it, is Amazon slot types. Alexa entities are basically that. They're only available in the US right now, as you've probably seen in the documentation, but they are they're a way to extend different classes of entities, and people typically use them in scenarios. I think the prime example that I've really seen is classifying like musical artists or authors. What is ambient computing? I mean, I guess I could try to answer that one, but back to Alexa entities. So basically how it's going to work is that it will try to specifically figure out details related to common libraries of concepts. So with the author, before with Amazon built-in slot types, you would just get maybe the actual slot value. With Alexa entities, you get additional information. So you could get things like with musical artists, the song, the album it came on, the year it was released, things like that. So Alexa entities are meant to give you more information about a particular, I guess noun would be the right term to use, a particular noun, and they are expanding that library. They have intentions to continue to expand that library, and so you should see more entity types coming along within the next year or so. What is ambient computing? Well, I think that's a personal definition. I believe the way I've thought of ambient computing is essentially things that happen without your direct intervention. So we treat, or at least my interactions treat ambient computing as what's kind of happening on a display device without me having to directly talk to it. And it shows me kind of what's going on there, or ambient interactions, as it were. Is there a way to get the overall number of people that activated my skill? Because I think the analytics page doesn't no longer allow time spans like a year. So Block Lab on Twitch asked, is there a way to get the overall number of people activated on my skill? Well, you're probably not going to like my answer. It is on the analytics page. What you could do is, starting from now, so you won't get the historical number. And so what you could do is you could use the skill events. So these are the offline events. You can set it up where essentially there's subscribed and not subscribed and other concepts. And you can start to, there's an enabled and disabled event, and over time you could start to track who has enabled and disabled your skill. But that would only be from this moment, and you wouldn't know who would necessarily be able to track who it was, but you would know the number of activations. But yeah, we'd only store data for a limited amount of time. So you won't get historical who activated my skill unless you were personally tracking it over time. But you can get what we have in the analytics console now, and you can start to find clever ways to track enablements using the events, offline events. Fabio asks, is Let's Entities available in Brazil? It is not. So it's only in the US and Canada, as Steve actually pointed out here. It is only available in US and Canada. But yeah, as Steve also mentioned, make sure to indicate interest on, we have a Slack channel, which is also a good spot. Let me pull that up. Where you can talk with other Alexa developers and then people like me and other people on the Alexa team. We are in that Slack in and out. We could see things that are of interest to you and things that you think might be valuable, and we can take that back to the other teams and see how we can make it happen. Welcome. It's just me today. Last time I had a friend with me, but as I mentioned, it is a post-holiday week here, so everybody is taking advantage and taking an extra day off. But maybe next time I can bring another of my teammates with me and we can talk about various skill development recommendations. Also, now is a good time to mention that in a couple weeks we have Alexa Live coming up, which I'll show that as well. Block Lab says it'd be really awesome if you would show a badge for download and activations like Google Play. That's actually good feedback. I'll make a note of that, and I also recommend, tweeting at Alexa devs that idea, and they can take it back to the team as well. But Alexa Live, so that'll be coming up on the 21st, and shock to me is the 21st is actually not that far away anymore. So yeah, 2021 is just going by really fast and really slow at the same time. But Alexa Live, there is an event schedule up on the website. I think it actually might be fun to walk through that. And I can give as much of a hint as basically not giving a hint. Let me pull it up. All right, share your screen. I like to narrate everything I do. It's there it is. All right, so Alexa Live is coming up on the 21st. That link I give you just takes us to the main page. There it is. And what I'm interested in is the schedule. So it's a pretty packed schedule. The one that, there's options for everybody. So RCalf asks, I'm trying to add a local news skill, but specifically don't want a flash briefing. Are there any resources I can use to let users of the skill listen to the news? A local news skill. So you basically want to stream audio is what you're asking, I believe. Well, I'll let you answer that. I will pull this up. Yes, you want to stream audio. So essentially, that's an audio player experience. What you can do, and this is just my approach to this, not necessarily the best way. If you don't want to use a flash briefing, I assume it's because you want people to be able to do other things than just listen to a snippet of news. And so you would just use audio player. And what some people do is they do streaming audio with audio player. There's actually some examples on GitHub of how to do that. I will caution that, as with all things on the internet, streaming audio can be expensive. And so if you can find a feed or a service that offsets that cost for you, then that's great. But otherwise, if you're making your own content, you just want to be cognizant of where you're storing it and how you're pulling it up. But yeah, I would just say use audio player. If the audio is less than 4 minutes, then SSML is always a great option as well. Yeah, just a streaming audio skill with audio player custom skill. Keep forgetting I should mention custom skill. Brian Tarbox on Facebook says, is there a way to play a music clip in the background while some text is being spoken? There is. So if you haven't figured it or looked at it already, there's a feature called APL Audio. And that feature supports doing a background and foreground audio. There are some limitations to it, so you will need to work on ducking the audio. You will need to work on making sure it's the right length right now. There are some features coming with APLA that you might get to see at Alexa Live. I believe you get to see them at Alexa Live, that will kind of talk about the updates that are coming for that feature later in the year. But if you just want to be able to have Alexa speaking or a poly voice speaking while there's music playing in the background, you can check out APL Audio. Just keep in mind that it has the same restrictions as SSML audio, so read prompts are only 90 seconds, and it has that 4-minute limit right now. And so that would be my recommendation for you. All right. Arkoff, you said that's the issue. The audio will be more than 5 minutes. Yeah, so you would want to use audio player. But again, keep in mind with audio player, as you probably know, once audio player starts playing for a while, the skill session exits. So users will have a not as easy a time of re-engaging. So again, we have a lot of features coming out, so you might see some more updates to help you with this. But for now, with audio player, you just want to make sure that news experience is at the end, that you get everything out that you want from them. There is a way to send a message after the audio ends, but it will not re-engage the user. So that's kind of the limitation you're working with now, is anything over 5 minutes has to use audio player. Brian Tarbox says, I have a sports skill and want to play team's music while talking about the team. That was in addition to your previous question. Yeah. So check out APLA, Brian. Let us know how it works. You can tweet at Alexa Devs if you have any issues. Maybe one day we can get the PM for that feature on here. He's really nice. I'm sure he'd love to talk about it. But also, again, I can't emphasize enough, there's a lot of great stuff coming at Alexa Live. So I highly recommend checking out some of these sessions that are coming up. And Steve has linked the APL for audio feature. Thank you, Steve. But just in case you haven't seen it. All right. Why is there such a lack of support for Alexa developers? That's an interesting question. I feel like Office Hours is extremely supportive, but if you feel specifically that you're not getting support, yeah, come here, tweet at us, send us messages on LinkedIn. We're happy to help you out more. Block Lab asks, if you don't know what you expect from a certain field, for example, tweet text, the Amazon search query slot type, ooh, that's a hard one, is still the best one, right? That's a subjective question, right? So again, everything I'm saying here is based on my preferences for developing skills, or is just pulled from the documentation. In this case, it will be my preference for developing skills. I personally don't like search query. I think it's a little too open-ended and a little too prone to sometimes you're getting more information you need and you're having to parse more. So my background is actually in technical writing and in information systems, and so I really love language and I love how we interpret what people say. And so I try to, when I'm developing skills and working on language models, to figure out every way the user is going to say it. So I tend not to use search query because I I find it to be a little bit too open-ended. But yes, if you do not know quite what you're going to get and you haven't built a language model for that, and you have a carrier phrase like tweet, search query is still viable. But I think over time, as you start to get more input from your users and get a better idea of what they're asking for, you can build a more robust language model that has slots and slot types and doesn't necessarily rely on search query. But that, of course, is my personal preference. I would say if you have a carrier phrase and you don't know what they're going to say, search query is a perfectly reasonable choice. I'm just going to be I guess, like they talk about the PC elitists, maybe a non-search query elitist. Oh, right. Steve shared it. I'm still getting used to how this multi-channel thing works. So Steve did share this link in the Facebook chat, but for everybody on non-Facebook, I'll leave it up for a little while. Fabio asked, Steph, I showed Alexa to my uncle, and he's nearly 80 years old and speaks slowly. How can I configure Alexa to wait for him to finish his speech? So we don't have the ability to do the longer response times right now. I know it's something that a lot of people have asked for. What you can do is you can ask Alexa to talk slower. You can slow down her speech, just like you can get her to whisper. And so that is one potential option. But in terms of giving longer response times, that is something that we, is very important to us to kind of investigate, because we do recognize that people need longer times, not just older people, but also children. Anybody who has kids probably knows that you ask them a pretty difficult question and they may sit there for a minute and figure out what they want to say, or sometimes they'll blurt out the first thing they think. So we always trying to, as both skill developers and as Alexa, trying to figure out ways to work around that and make it a better experience for everybody. All right. And again, you can also, I believe the APL audio is under the Alexa presentation language documentation. It is. And so if you are looking for that, I'll put up Celadot's link. If you're looking for that, it's just under Alexa presentation language. And so if you're already working with that, it's a good resource. Brian Tarbox on Facebook asks, is there any way within a skill to offer a user a way to send a feature request to the skill author? Oh, that's intriguing. You could do the search query method, actually, if you wanted, where they would just trigger that and send in a response, and then you could do something with that. I don't know how useful of a feature you're going to get in 8 seconds, but it could be intriguing. I'd actually be curious how well that would work. The other way, Brian, honestly, is to just encourage the users to reach out to your support. I know we have some limitations on web links, but you can link your support email on your skill description. And so I would, that's one way that you can get a quality skill feature request without being limited to the response time. Let's think of a clever way, though. Maybe we can crowdsource this. Way to send a feature request by voice. Yeah, honestly, the time limit on being able to respond is really what's hanging me up here. Yeah, I would say there's no specific feature, there's no specific tool. You just have to use a clever way of either working with search query, where again you would need a carrier phrase like tell so and so I want this, and your carrier phrase could be that whole line, or you could again kind of move them in the direction of sending feedback to your support channels and engaging with you on social media and submitting there. There are a lot of skilled developers actually that I've seen that they are very active in their support channels, and they get a lot of feature requests, a lot of responses. Sometimes they find issues through their customers well before they would have found it in testing. And so it's been a really great resource for those developers. Yeah, Brian. So Brian said he could ask the users if they would like feature X and respond yes or no. Yeah, that's a great way to understand how valuable features that you have in mind might be. And actually, honestly, I find that to be the better route. I find when you give people an open-ended kind of free-form response, you'll get a lot of stuff that may not be useful for you. Whereas if you have a better idea of kind of, would it be beneficial if I added this premium subscription, or, would it be beneficial to you if I sent you a daily summary of how you're doing in your game and how you're comparing to your friends. That way you kind of put into their head the idea of like, oh, I didn't think I needed this, but now I think I do need it. And they can respond yes or no to that. Yeah, that's a great idea. Plus, yes or no questions are always fantastic because they're really easy to handle with Alexa as opposed to more freeform questions. That's a great question, Brian. All right. PR Benson on Twitch. Ugh, English is hard. I have an existing skill hosted on AWS Lambda that I'd like to add in-skill purchasing to. Should I migrate the skill to be Alexa hosted before adding ISP, or keep it on Lambda? PR Benson, it really is up to you. I personally like Lambda hosted skills. I like the ability to have more granular control. I tend to also work with more than just the baseline AWS services. But again, I've also been developing skills since 2017. And so there's a little bit of that stuck in my ways kind of approach here. So I would say whichever is more comfortable for you from a hosting standpoint. In-skill purchasing is really done. You can do it at the Alexa hosted level, or you could do it at Lambda. I find it much easier to manage a skill with Lambda personally, but that's because I've been doing it that way for years. I'd be curious if anybody in the chats has worked primarily with Alexa hosted skills and what your experience has been. Got it. Follow-up to that sounds like keeping it on Lambda would be more flexible and quicker to market for my use case. I definitely would, because you're already there. And so migrating over, you always have to deal with retesting, resubmitting it for certification, which you would have done anyways, adding ISP. But as far as costs, are they similar? I'm going to be honest, PR Bins, and I don't actually know the price differences between the two. I don't believe Alexa hosted has the same charge structure, or if we even do charge for Alexa hosted. I've never looked that up, actually. Let's find out. Got it. So real quick. So basically Alexa hosted skills are meant to host, and again, because I don't ever use them, this is why I couldn't really answer this. Alexa hosted skills are meant to host, kind of like midline Alexa skills. So if you have a high usage skill, or you expect it to have high usage, anything that's going to exceed the AWS free tier limits on the 4 services that Alexa hosted uses, and the ones you really have to worry about are Dynamo and Lambda. I don't think necessarily S3 will be one where you are at risk of exceeding the limits. But basically, once you exceed those limits, so it's free to host with us, but once you exceed those limits, you have to migrate it over to AWS. So I would say if you expect this to be a high traffic skill, then you would want to keep it on Lambda. The more you know. I didn't know that today. Yeah, and TradeLast mentions really great thing. Once you have a skill published, you can apply for the $100 monthly AWS credit. So that is another option. Again, if you have skills that are going to be high traffic, high usage, so I think I'll stick to Lambda. Yeah, I think you probably would be fine with Alexa hosted, but again, it's kind of a trade-off. If you expect down the road that you're going to start to really exceed, 3.2 million seconds of compute time a month, which you could, depending on what your skill is doing. Then you have, you're kind of faced with the challenge of, now do I migrate? Whereas I think for skills with more casual usage, it makes sense to stay on Alexa hosted. Alexa hosted just makes the whole connection between Alexa and the skill backend a little bit easier, especially for newer users. Again, as somebody who is, been working with skills for a while, Lambda to me, it's, apples and apples. They are the same to me, and so I just stay kind of on Lambda, where I have access to easily to more connections within the AWS environment. Yeah, Brian, I would recommend staying on Lambda for your. Brian says he has a skill with 17,000 invocations a month. That is one that I would keep Alexa on AWS. All right. Brian also asked, can we expect more emotions? I actually don't know. I honestly can't really talk about roadmap in general, but I also would honestly say I don't know what the emotions roadmap is. So I will be just as excited as you if we get any more emotions. BlockLove asks about getting more AWS credits. That's also one that I am not familiar with. I think it follows the same rules as the rest of AWS, where you have a certain free tier limit and a certain Alexa, that $100 credit. And I think from there, once the skill starts to exceed the free tier limit, is when you get into kind of working out better cost models for yourself. Again, I can't advise you on your pricing. I can just all I ever disclaimer is that video and streaming audio are can become costly, and so I like to caution people to test out what that looks like for their billing before they commit to it. Arcalf is a big proponent of using Lambda versus Alexa hosted. I'd actually be curious how many people who were developing skills prior to Alexa hosted existing, and then those who picked up skill development when Alexa hosted was out, what the preference there is. I'm certain that most of the pre 20, was that 2019? Pre 2019 developers probably just are stuck in their ways with Lambda or whatever endpoint hosting service they were using before. Somebody on LinkedIn says, "Hi, Steph. How can one use a voiceover in Alexa? The use different audio in your skill doc doesn't really provide enough guidance." Voiceover in Alexa. So it really depends. Again, as I don't know if you were here earlier, but it depends on the length of the audio. So whether it's more than 4 minutes, essentially, if it's less than that, then you can just create a audio file, and the specifications on that should be in the SSML documentation, which I will look up, or my buddy Trade Loss will probably find it faster than me. But so it really depends on how long your audio is and what you're trying to do. In general, you can use the speech synthesis markup language. Try saying that 10 times fast to sort of insert your MP3. There are some, limitations to that. There's certain features you can't use if you're not using either Alexa or the what we call the SSML voice, aka the poly voices within the skill. But you can certainly just put an MP3 file in there in the speak response that you send. So yeah, just depends on what you want to do. Brian asked, can we get a sense of what percentage of users have devices with screens? If it's not publicly in an article somewhere, then I would say that's not what I can answer, and I wouldn't expect a solid metric on that. But I will say, if you just consider, how popular Fire TV is, and that is an Alexa interface, just use that as kind of a gauge of, if you engage with Fire TV a lot or with streaming video, then you can kind of determine for yourself how worthwhile it would be to invest in screen. But screens are here to stay. We like screens. So there's no downside to investing in that. It just depends on how much you want to invest. Let's see. All right. Mr. Survival Expert on Twitch says, "Hi, I have an old skill that uses the render template." Oh, very old skill. And APL interface. I removed render template since it is deprecated and redeployed, but in the web console, I still see the warning about the skill using a deprecated interface. Will the skill be fine, or what do I have to do to get rid of the warning? This is a great question, because I'm sure some people recently got an email about display templates are kind of on their way out. APL is so much easier. And for those that have display templates but maybe haven't moved over to APL, the APL authoring interface that you will find in the developer console has a lot of examples to get you started that relate to the templates you might have used. So like display template 3, 7, I think we had 7 was the max number of display templates. And so for this one, the first thing you want to do is check in your settings for the skill. I'm not actually using the proper word here. It's called interfaces. You know when you use when you use something a lot and so you don't actually remember what any of the labels are? That's what's happening to me right now. So let me get in there. Show me the developer console. All right. I have a lot of random test skills. Right, it's the interfaces. Oh, that's interesting. And you just want to make sure in interfaces here, I'll pull it up on here. We'll see all my. Pull this over and we can see my console. All right, so the error that Mr. Survival Expert is referring to is this one that you'll see. Your skill uses a display interface which is not supported on Alexa. And so really what that means is that this guy was toggled. But as you can see, it's actually displaying it whether or not I have the display interface enabled. I clearly do not have it turned on. I don't have anything turned on but APL for this particular device. So I'm actually going to take that as a bug and go back to the team and see if we can get that fixed. Thanks for pointing that out. I will make a note about that. Yeah, so as you can see, I don't actually have it enabled, but it's still just warning me. I think this is actually more of a blanket warning to make sure that you are aware of the change. But yeah, for anybody that has display interfaces currently, they are going to be deprecated. You should have seen this message. You also should have probably gotten an email. And there's a ton of resources for how to convert over to APL. And so you'll just want to do that before the expiration time. All right. All right. Oh, Milton came in with the SSML audio link. It's funny, I can't copy that. Here, I'll pull it up then. Everybody's really chatty today. I feel like last time we chilled out a little bit more. All right. Here. All right, I am completely behind. Yeah, Milton. So my response to Block Lab is we don't certainly can note it as a request, but we do not have currently support for longer times. My recommendation on analytics is if you have a certain preference for analytics or for a time period, start to track that on in your own backend. I realize it's a little bit of work. We do have the events feature where you can get in certain events such as subscriptions and enable disabled events. And so you could use that as an indicator of kind of your usage. However, it won't give you historical, again, because you'll start tracking it from that point in time, but something to consider. But I will make a note on this request for longer tracking of enablements. Okay. Celadot asks another good question. Does the skill need to be certified afterwards? This is in reference to the going from display templates to APL. The live version still uses the outdated display interface. So yes, it will need to be recertified only because you're turning on the APL interface. You could realistically, and disabling templates at some point, but if you've moved over to APL already and all you're doing on your backend is just taking out the display template response, then you're fine. However, if you have never enabled APL before, that is considered a manifest change. And actually, if you pull down your manifest, you'll notice it looks a little bit different. And so that would require a recertification in order to get the APL live. Yeah, and Milton, as Block Lab has mentioned, I recommended kind of tweeting these feature requests at Alexa devs. One, because my memory is terrible, and while I am writing this down, I will forget context, and two, because it gets more eyes on the request. Mr. Survival Expert, yes. So Mr. Survival Expert's original question was, the deprecation notice keeps showing up for me even though I removed it. We have kind of discovered that that might be a bug in the way the notice displays. I think it's just a blanket notice, but I can double check. And their follow-up question is, everything should be fine then for the skill if I was working with APL right now? Yes, everything should be fine. So if it's working with APL, you're not using display templates, you're good to go. Once the display templates deprecate, they just won't work anymore. Damien Mayers on YouTube says, I've implemented my own AVS client and APL renderer for an app I've created, and whilst most skills are sending APL, I noticed when I ask for the weather, it still shows using a display template. Is weather one that won't be going over to APL soon? Are you talking about the Alexa's weather response? Or are you doing your own weather response? Yeah, I'd like to thank TradeLast and Milton for being excellent URL scavengers. You have managed to pull up the URLs faster than me. The built-in weather response. Yeah, so, again, we're all going over to APL, so eventually it should move. I haven't actually looked to see what they're doing with weather, but you should expect everything will no longer be using display templates after a while. But that shouldn't hopefully affect your experience. That's more on the on us to get that moved over. Brian Tarbuck says he just recently got the 2nd-gen Echo Buds. I haven't actually tried them out, so I am curious how people like them. I got to test some of the earlier releases for the original Echo Buds. I have tiny ears though, and so they don't stay in my ears. But for people with normal sized ears, I'm sure it's a great experience. All right. So I said I was going to go through the Alexa Live sessions. So this is going to be fun because I actually don't know the content of any of the sessions except for one, which is one that I'm quickly speaking in. But I would say create engaging skills with layered audio. So yeah, as I was mentioning, any updates about APLA, APL, you can even see from this title, they're going to be in this 11:45 a.m. session on the 21st. So if that's something of interest to you, I highly recommend checking this particular session out. And we should be posting the sessions post Alexa Live as well. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, they talk about using layered audio here. Layered audio in this case was in relation to that backgrounding and audio question, as well as having kind of foreground audio. So this is one tool you can work with. Again, there are some caveats to it. You do have to kind of tweak the way the audio layers. It's not an exact science quite yet, but it is pretty useful if you want to do that custom background with either the Polly or Alexa voices. And then this motion for choreographed responses, I think everybody's probably at this point seen the Echo Show 10, which moves around. So this will show you some new ways you can work with that feature to engage. It's pretty interesting, especially if you're working with kind of tracking people. So I like to see it in recipe experiences where maybe I'm moving around the kitchen and I don't want to. I want to have to lean over and get a crick in my neck trying to see the screen. Milton with the Alexa hosted. Let's see. I've been only using Lambda, but tried hosted recently to see if I could make things easier for clients. They wouldn't have to create an AWS account. That's good reason. Main challenge I hit was using images in the S3 bucket they create since they enforce security using a token. The generated URL containing the token would break my APL code. I'm actually curious why it would break your APL code, Milton. So one thing I'm a big proponent of is secure S3 buckets. And so using public links is not something I condone. Again, personal opinion is not necessarily the opinion of the Alexa team or Amazon. But I've had great success working with the S3 URL generators and using secure links for that. So I'd be curious why you are having issues with it and your APL. All right, what's another cool session? I'm just going to try and guess what's in these sessions based on what they're called. Build higher quality skills with new authoring, testing, and feedback tools. If I had to guess, I would say this is in relation to, how you can see phrases and utterances that your customers have said, and you can reclassify them. So essentially unhandled utterances. If I had to guess, I would say that some of that's going to be in here. Again, don't quote me on that. I'm not actually sure what this session is going to be about beyond just introducing some new tools. But recommendations for slots. So we do have utterance recommendations. So I would think, and if you go to create a slot, you'll see in there, if you start typing like different types of drinks, like coffee, it'll start to recommend slots for you to fill in there. And so I think this might actually be an expansion on that, but we'll see. New Alexa tools. I'm personally excited about this one for selfish reasons. You'll see my face during this session. Can I share the screen I'm reading? Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Thank you, Trade Last. I guess I removed it. Yeah, so I'm currently scoping out the Alexa Live sessions. So as I mentioned, when you couldn't see, is so creating layered audio, animations, motions, and more. So this will be the session for anybody that's interested in APLA, interested in updates to APL. You can expect content on that here. Again, I do not know what they're actually going to talk about, but they do mention APL and they are talking about layered audio. So my context clue says it will be at least those two features, if not more. Building higher quality skills with new authoring tools. This is the testing one I mentioned. And again, they'll probably talk about some updates to, making it your language models a little bit easier to build through recommendations. So either of these sessions sound exciting. Let's see what's over here. Build great video experiences for devices. So this is video skills specifically, I think. I don't know. Everybody else can guess as to what these sessions are about as well. Oh, this one's about coffee. I'll have to attend this session. Lavazza. Select the right combination of Alexa technologies and pick a system integrator. So this is going to be an AVS session for those that work with AVS devices. Thanks, Fabio. I have a good time. This is completely off the cuff, and so I appreciate you all being really patient with me. Jeff was kind enough to ask if I wanted to come back since he was on vacation. So I of course was like, oh yeah, I'd be really excited to talk to everybody again. And we can get my my terrible interpretations on what these sessions are about. Alexa for residential. This is actually what my team works with. So shameless plug here. I don't actually work with Alexa for residential, but this is kind of the group that I work in with. So where you see, I'm sure some people have seen actually Alexa in some hotels. There's a Legoland video out there about Alexa at Legoland, which I thought was really cool. Again, I didn't have anything to do with that, but this is where they'll be talking about what that looks like. So you're kind of taking skills and devices and device management and seeing how to manage that at a company scale, and what kind of experiences to include there, and how these companies can create custom experiences for what their residents are using or other solutions. So that'll be if you're curious what's happening in that space, that's a good session to attend. As you can see, I haven't mastered the art of using my scroll bar, so we're just gonna. Mr. Survival Expert has asked on Twitch, I have a customer asking for an always-on Alexa skill on its smart TV, but I wasn't able to figure out a way to do it. Is there a way to have a skill always displaying the APL screens on his Fire TV? Currently, no. The concept of always-on is not something we really have right now. So you could kind of send Alexa screensavers. So a good skill that is an example of this kind of screensaver experience is Big Sky. I'm also welcome to any other recommendations for screensavers. That's the only one I've really seen. And so that ends up being like a video skill that plays for a while, and you could kind of cheat it that way. But there is a timeout period if there's no engagement. And so we do that for many reasons. It's mostly to ensure people are aware that an Alexa skill is still active. And so to answer your question, Mr. Survival Expert, there's not a real way today. There's a couple of workaround solutions with video that you can try. But again, at some point, the user will need to engage with the skill again, or there needs to be some form of kind of re-engagement to get the session refreshed. And now's a great time as well. If you're not part of the Slack, please join. I occasionally peek in there. Usually by the time I see a question, somebody in the community has already answered it. So it's really great to see. It's also great to see like just how adept people are at certain parts of Alexa. I've seen some great APL discussions. Milton update. I think I misspoke about APL. Tried to use the token URL inside an SSML audio tag and it choked on that. How would I code audio SSML with a URL? Huh. So Milton is having some issues with the S3 secure links inside an SSML audio tag. They should work just fine. So let's follow up offline about that. I'd be curious if it's a bug. How recent you've been experiencing that, because essentially any valid URL should work inside those tags. So it just means that maybe the tag is not formatted quite right, or we have an issue with SSML and secure links. But I'm gonna write a note on that. All right. Celadot also has a screensaver skill. Let's see if I can open it. Can't click links. Yeah, it's literally called screensaver. That's super on the nose. I like it. So you can look at Zealot's screensaver skill as well. If you want to check that out. And also reach out to Zealot for best practices for using screensavers. I'll check it out later as well. Well, I'm just going to keep calling you Zealot. Alexander Martin, who has worked with the screensavers. And I believe that's your name also on Slack. So they have agreed to be a resource. So reach out and hit them up. Good point, Trade Less. XML characters. That would make sense. Oh man, Trade Less, you can just run office hours and I'll just sit here and make bad jokes the whole time. So this is actually a really great example. Those pre-signed URLs are quite gnarly. They're very long. All right. Well, I said I was going to show you some more Skillful Builder today, but then I got distracted by questions and by the Alexa Live sessions that I was going to go through. So we ran out of time. Maybe next time I can actually I can walk through it. We're still kind of stuck in the menu selection right now and how to get that going. I also need to replay the Yukon Trail game. So for those that were here a couple weeks ago, I professed to my love of the Yukon Trail game, which is made by the same developer that developed Oregon Trail. It's a little less of a dire game. It talks about you're basically going up the west coast of the U.S. for the gold rush. It actually takes place a year before the major gold rush here in the United States. And so stumbled across the game in an emulator and said, let's build that into a voice game. And so we it's quite there's a lot of steps to it. And as I told everybody last time, as you're building games for Alexa, start small, which is not what I did here. So definitely don't start with a big game that has a lot of menu options and a lot of dialogue and a lot of content before they actually get to something satisfying. So you always want to give people a milestone that's satisfying. And that's kind of the way I treat video games in general. But we just got to building a menu because it was quite complicated, and we were I got into UX designer paralysis where I was like, well, if I make the menu this way it might be better, but then this is actually what it looks like for me to develop skills live. It's this constant idea of what would be the best UX. I always recommend if you have the time to script out your skills first before you start kind of building them. That way you can work through verbally how that dialogue would work and how people might respond. And if you haven't seen, there's some great new features in the tech world coming out. I'm sure everybody's seen the pair programming, the AI bot that you can use. I believe Jeff actually used it with Alexa, the SDK, and started to build a skill using that. And I've been meaning to check it out. And Trade Last just mentioned GPT-3 as well. So perfectly understand why you may have not dove into Skillful Builder this week, but maybe next time we can go through it, or maybe I'll get on ad hoc stream and continue to work on that Yukon Trail. All right. Well, we have 5 minutes left with office hours. If you have any more burning questions, feel free to reach out. Again, I want to thank you all for being such good hosts with me. I'm still kind of getting used to the office hours space, but I love talking to you. Love hearing some of your questions. I love finding bugs with you, apparently, and learning kind of the things you like to work on. And yeah, some of the new innovations in the AI space are just phenomenal. I can't wait to work with them. Can't wait to get to spend time tinkering with them. It's a good year for new tech. All right, let's see. Is there another session that I don't know what it is? Simplifying natural voice with less code. Go on. This is about Alexa Conversations. So Alexa Conversations actually was part of, you got kind of a teaser of it last year. There's been a lot of advancements in Alexa Conversations, and so this is the session if you are interested in that turn-taking, more natural conversational flow. I realize saying more natural conversational flow just sounds like what Alexa should be, but this is really where we've thought about, how do I make a dialogue as opposed to how do I programmatically do a back and forth handshake here. And so that's where Alexa Conversations comes in, and they'll be talking about some updates in that space. Brian Tarbox asks, is there any chance that Alexa could give us a hint about the speaker's emotions? So that kind of sentiment analysis is not necessarily in Alexa right now. And unless you're using the open-ended, actually you don't really get enough information. So you could use an AWS feature to glean sentiment analysis. But you would need a lot more text than what you're going to get out of a user, significantly more, to get a real idea of how they feel. But it's certainly something that I can understand. Frustration is something you want to track with the user, and so I would just say, keep an eye out. We will kind of take that feedback back if it's something that's interesting to you about getting sentiment analysis. Otherwise, you could potentially start playing around with slots where you put in some negative slots and see if a user triggers those and kind of take a action from there. There's also a lot of open source projects that use sentiment analysis that are not as heavy as some of the cloud services. All right. I think we had some people who were also talking about games last time. My game buddy is out today. He might come back for another office hours, but this will be a really exciting session. I got to see a sneak peek of it. And so I would just say I'm looking forward to watching this session. There's a lot of, there's so many sessions, different tracks as it were. And so it's hard to kind of pick and choose. But again, I believe we are going to be putting the videos up at a later time. So if you missed a session, you can watch it later. But don't quote me on that again, because I'm not sure if or when we are going to do that. Let's see, what else do we got? Smart reorders. Enable homes to anticipate what customers need when they need it. Oh, nice. Anybody remember Dash? The Dash buttons? I feel like in my heart of hearts that this is just a better Dash. I don't actually know. Well, it does say Dash replenishment service, so it will be related to Dash. And I would say that you're going to start seeing, probably seen it already, where we're kind of blurring the lines on what's a custom skill, what's a smart home skill. Basically we're already doing that with AVS, but you'll start to see, more and more as you go through the developer console, you're seeing ways in which we're kind of saying, access all different types of skills. You can have a video skill, or you could have video in your skill. You could, do a music experience, or you can, have music as part of your custom experience. And so I would say don't necessarily limit yourself to what you see in custom skills today, but kind of think about, what you could have in custom skills in the future. But enough of my monologuing about Alexa Live in these sessions. Thank you again for joining me today. I had a really great time, as always. If you have any questions, or you just want to reach out to us on Slack, the alexa.design/Slack community. Again, the community tends to answer faster than I do, so I'm there, I'm lurking, but I'm not as fast on the response. And then you can also hit us up on Twitter, as I mentioned, for those ideas that you have. We have Voice of Developer as a way to submit ideas, but you can also just reach out on Twitter, and the team can take a look and see kind of what's important to you. But again, thanks for joining me today. And Jeff should be back with you next week. And maybe I'll see you again here on the Alexa Devs channel at another time. Y'all have a great rest of your day. And, enjoy the weather.